Hey everybody, it's Michael Carey with the One Good Reason, coming at you live. I hope everybody's doing good. Using the headphones tonight because apparently iPhone 8 is having some kind of sound issue, something with the iOS 11.02 edition. So anytime basically that you play a video or you have any type of live picture, it'll have some kind of a crackling noise. It's pretty annoying. So it's my first time doing it with the headphones. I'm not sure if I'm going to have sound. So I guess I'll find out at the end. But yeah, tonight's talk's going to be about common sayings, some silly, words and silly phrases, where they come from. And then I also kind of wanted to get into some, not so historic phrases, but just kind of why we would say certain things. But like, just for example, to kick it off, have you ever heard the saying something like, "Oh, he was saved by the bell." That saying, right? There's a TV show, Saved by the Bell. But yeah, apparently that is a kind of a fucked up thing, to be honest. Basically, there was a widespread fear of being buried alive, or somebody mistaking you for being dead. Can you imagine? You're taking a nap and someone's like, "Oh, he's dead." And there's no funeral, or they just kind of bury you quickly. Maybe you were drunk, I don't know. But anyway, you end up in the ground. So what they would do back at that time was they would wrap a piece of string around your finger. It would go through the coffin, up through the ground, into some kind of a mechanism that was attached to a bell. Right. So if you woke up in the coffin and you started, freaking the fuck out, it would ring the bell. And the idea of a night shift apparently actually stems from this too. They would actually have guards out there, or I'm sorry, the graveyard shift. The graveyard shift. They would have guards actually sitting in the fucking graveyard, looking at all these mechanisms and these bells. And, sometimes the bells would ring. Can you believe that? So people were actually saved by the bell. They'd start digging them up and trying to get them out of there before they ran out of oxygen. Another one was, what was I was doing some research. One of them was caught red-handed. That was kind of interesting. Caught red-handed meaning that we caught you in the act, right? That you're guilty of doing it. You don't really have any arguments. Somebody's eating a cookie out of the cookie jar, and you happen to walk in and see them. And you're like, "Hey, I caught you red-handed. You can't lie about this. Now I know you ate the cookies." But the history of it is fucked up too. This one is saying, if somebody were to butcher an animal, and somebody claimed that, "Hey, this person butchered my animal, or an animal that didn't belong to them. He came into my fucking field and killed it." You couldn't do shit to them. The law said there had to be fresh blood on the person's hands at the time they made the claim. And if you say, "Well, look, they're holding some of that pork or the meat right there in their hands," that wasn't good enough. They had to have the actual blood on their hand. Can you believe that? So yeah, caught red-handed. I mean, now it's a little dialed down. It's just, generally to use for anything that you catch somebody in the act of doing, right? Maybe you come home from work and, your girl is is getting down with your neighbor or something, right? They're caught red-handed. But yeah, and then another one I was looking up was breaking the ice. A lot of you, when you start a new job, it's only a matter of time before you're, in your training class or whatever it is. And, there's a bunch of strangers and they do these icebreakers, right? Well, they have ask everybody a question, or they go around the table and say, "Tell us one interesting fact about you," or stuff like this. But it's actually not as fun as that. The history of it is just basically anybody that was in a port town, right? Like, anybody that lived in a port town, they would suffer pretty significantly during the winter time. Obviously the water would freeze and they wouldn't be able to do business. So they'd have to actually break the ice so they could communicate with whoever they were trading with or whatever it was. So that's where that comes from. A couple more off the top of my head. Kicking the bucket, right? When someone says, "Oh, that's something you want to do before you kick the bucket, right? You want to go to Paris, or you want to go to Jamaica, or you want to travel, or, ask that girl out, or whatever it is, or you hear this is the bucket list, or what is the bucket, right, have to do with you fucking dying? What does this bucket have to do with anything? Well, when a farmer would select a cow to kill, for burger or whatever it was, maybe it was just for whatever, they're selecting this cow to kill, they would hoist it up with this pulley system, and they would put a big bucket under the cow to catch, I guess, whatever drippings would fall from the cow. And it's pretty fucked up. What would happen is some of the cows would kind of be wise to this, or at least be alarmed enough to say, well, what the fuck's going on? I'm getting lifted off the ground. And they would buck and kick the bucket over, literally before they died. That's where it comes from. Some people say, well, kicking the bucket, some people might stand on a bucket before they hang themselves, and then they're the ones that kick the bucket out from under themselves. The devil made me do it. Right, so, kicking the bucket, it's kind of a morbid, has kind of a morbid origin, but it definitely has to do with cows, so just keep that in mind the next time you have a glass of milk. Another saying, this one kind of got me a little upset, but because I say it all the time, not all the time, but I say it a lot, and I was just ignorant to the history of it. But when you hear someone say, this is a good rule of thumb, right? I always just thought of it as like a fundamental golden rule, or a go-to when in doubt, follow the rule of thumb, right? That's what I thought it was. It's just a healthy, good fallback. When things get too complicated, the rule of thumb is, well, when in doubt, whip it out, or something like this, right? Rule of thumb was a fucking law that, a husband could beat his woman as long as he used a stick that wasn't wider than his thumb. So a switch, I'm allowed under this law, right, to get a switch that's not wider than my thumb and go to town on my wife when she makes me upset. I can just whip the shit out of her with the switch. And if she calls and hollers and yells and the police come and they're like, what the fuck's going on in here? There's blood everywhere. Looks like Passion of the Christ, right? Or, and I show them the switch, I'm good. I'm off the hook, right? Off the hook. That's another saying. We can we can get into that. But yeah, rule of thumb, pretty sinister origin. Pretty fucked up. I feel a little different. Obviously, we can change sayings and make them mean different things over time. Yes, I know. I just, me personally, feel a little weird saying it going forward. But another one that I thought was pretty surprising was spilling the beans, right? When someone says, someone's surprise party's coming up, and we don't want to let so-and-so know, don't say anything. And then the person shows up and your buddy is like, oh, you're not, I hope you're not, I hope you're going to like your party. And everyone's like, oh, fuck, you spilled the beans, right? You gave up the secret. And I was kind of like, well, where does spilling the beans come from? What do the beans have to do with anything? Like, what kind of beans are these? And why isn't it spilling the corn or spilling the carrots? Or why the beans, right? So the history of this is basically political, actually. So let's say there's, John Smith and John Johnson, right? Or Jane Johnson, we'll say, right? It's a man and a female, right? And they're both running for office. And what they would do is they would have these two little sacks, these two little bags. And all of the people that were voting would be given both a white bean and a black bean, right? And the white bean would be that they are for that person, and the black bean would be that they were against that person. So you can, fast forward, people will be lining up and they'd be putting black beans in, let's say John Smith's bag, and some black beans and maybe some white beans in Jane Johnson's bag. And, eventually they'd be able to, count up who had the most white beans. Sometimes people would fuck up, right? They go up to the bag and they put their shit in, but they'd kick the bag over. They'd spill the beans so everybody could see who was losing or who was winning or whatever at that point. And it was kind of fucked up the whole thing. But yeah, that's spilling the beans. It wasn't like anyone farted or anything, I don't or cutting the cheese. But yeah, so those were a couple of sayings that were just kind of in the back of my mind. Another one, I was just thinking about this before I came live. It was tip of my tongue. It was tip of my tongue. It was cat got your tongue. There we go. Right, cat got your tongue. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is another morbid. Has another morbid origin, I should say. This one is basically there was something called a cat o' nine tails. Cat o' nine tails. Now, if any of you have ever seen a movie like, I don't know, 12 Years a Slave, right? Or Amadeus, or, one of these slave movies where the entirety of the story, these people are being whipped or tortured or whatever, you've probably seen this thing called a cat o' nine tails. It looks like a whip or fucking tassels, right? It looks like tassels. It's got 9 belts, right? And on the belts, there's all of these lumps, these knots. And sometimes it could be metal, and sometimes it could just be leather knots. And, this was intended to cause additional gouging of the skin, additional, evisceration of the flesh. And just cause as much bleeding as possible. They didn't want the welts. They wanted the skin to break, right? So this cat o' nine tails, how does this go into the whole cat got your tongue? Well, they would hit you hard enough and long enough with this shit that you wouldn't be able to speak. So they'd say that the cat got your tongue. And in fact, somebody who was whipping, right, would be, hey, what's the matter with you? I ain't hearing you holler, right? And maybe one of their partners would go around to the other side of the pole, looking you in the face and say, what's the matter? Cat got your tongue. So, that's another fucked up origin story that I found out about one of these sayings that we say all the time. Another one was, I used to smoke cigarettes, but I quit cold turkey. Matter of fact, I want to take a puff right now. But quit cold turkey, right? Why is it cold? Why is it a turkey, right? Why isn't it a hot? I quit hot ham. Why is it cold turkey? Well, it was to say that people that were on drugs, going through withdrawals, their skin would become pasty and almost translucent, very, very clear, almost like my skin, right? I'm so translucent. And it would become kind of bumpy and look similar to a turkey's plucked skin. So quitting cold turkey, that's where that comes from. Let's see what Xavier Hayes is in the room with us. Quote, God bless you is another one. Yeah, God bless you, as opposed to anything else blessing you, It's kind of, there's a lot of these, and that's funny. I'll actually go ahead and touch on that, the God bless you. The saying Happy Thanksgiving, it's so funny because you have the Puritans and then you have the Europeans, right? Just in general during those times, right? The colonial times. The Puritans' idea of a Thanksgiving was you were in church all day. And I'm not exaggerating. When I say all day, you're in there from when you woke up to it was dark outside. Well, you didn't do anything that day but the church. I mean, you were in there all day. And It was a day of fasting. Eat as little as possible. And then you have the opposite. Obviously, what we do now is we pig out. That's another saying, right? We eat like pigs. We eat so much food, maybe more than we can stomach. And Xavier, like a black church all day. Blacker than that. This is, and maybe so black that the day after was deemed Black Friday. No, I'm kidding. Because we were all late to work that day. No, I'm kidding. So, but yeah, these are some silly fucking sayings. The last one I want to touch on before I get into some nuances that I want to touch on, is biting the bullet. Right? When you bite the bullet, what are you doing? Right? You're just saying fuck it and just going through that shitty thing that you really don't want to go through with. It's like, man, Joey's coming over with that fuck boy, Bronson. That dude, he never wears socks. He always stinks. And, he's just a dummy, and he gets loud, and he threw up in my car the last time, and I really don't want to fucking hang out with Bronson, but I'm cool with hanging out with the other people. And it's like, man, but it's the dude's birthday, and he wants me to come out, and fuck it. I'll just bite the bullet and fucking go. Right? You're biting the bullet. Well, why is it a bullet? Why is it a bullet that you're biting? Why isn't it a pencil or biting your knuckle? Or why say bite the bullet? Well, this comes from being a surgeon or a medical technician in a combat zone. And when you're operating on people, a lot of people, right? People are dying. People are injured. You're running out of, anesthesia. You're running out of the medicines that you need before you can do surgery, right? Then we're like, well, I don't know what we're gonna do here. Bite down on this bullet. And, booze him up. Give him some booze. I'd rip his shirt, but it's covered in blood, and and put that in his mouth. But just here, bite down on this bullet, long ways or short ways, and we're gonna booze you up. And hey, Felicia's got me on check. Yeah, I appreciate that. But yeah, biting the bullet. So, and next time that you're thinking of, how bad it is, right? You're gonna go hang out with that shitty friend who's subscribed to the rest of the group or whatever it is. You're gonna go meet the in-laws or hang out with the in-laws or whatever it is. Just think of the origin of that is biting the actual bullet, because you're so boozed up and they don't have any anesthesia or any painkiller, any morphine, before they cut open your gut and try to hunt around for a bullet to pull out of you, or shrapnel or whatever it was. But yeah, those are some of the silly sayings that we might say on the regular. The other thing I wanted to touch into, just really quick, is like tonight, right? I do these Tiger Talks on Friday nights. And I started saying to myself, now this might sound a little out there, but just go with this. I say, why do we say Friday night? Right? Why don't we say Fri-Night? Why don't we say Saturday night or Sun night? We throw the word day and then the night. I mean, it wouldn't make sense to say Fri-Night day, right? I mean, why do we, it's the day of Fri, but the nighttime of that day, right? Something silly like that. I've just been thinking about these things, or you might say, oh, I was just eating this fucking Hot Pocket, and I burned the roof of my mouth, right? I burned the roof of my mouth. And I would say, oh, the roof of your mouth, wouldn't this be the roof and this be the ceiling? This would be the ceiling, right? I mean, this is my ceiling. And, tonight. Yeah, and so on. It just goes on and on. But the roof of the mouth should actually be called maybe the top of the mouth, right? It's not literally the roof. This would be the roof, the outside, right? And this would be the ceiling. It takes too long to say ceiling. We still want that one syllable when we're talking really fast with our friends. We can just say the top of the mouth, right? There was a time where I was talking to I think I was talking to, was it Xavier or was it another friend of mine, Bart? But I was talking to somebody, and they were just looking at me and they said, Mike, I always eat Hot Pockets and I burn the roof of my mouth. And I said, why do you call it the roof of your mouth and not, the top of your mouth or the ceiling of your mouth? And he said, well, because that's just, what everybody calls it, And I said, okay, I mean, but now that we've agreed that it's silly and it doesn't make any sense, are you going to continue to do that? And it was like this awkward pause, like, I'm probably going to continue to say the random nonsensical statement because everybody else will understand me. And if I deviate from that and I actually say something that makes sense, then I'll be the random nonsensical one, or it'll take too long for them to understand what I'm saying when I say the top of my mouth versus the bottom of my mouth, or is just the floor of my mouth, or right. So it was kind of like this. I'm like, okay, so you're willing to continue on with the nonsense that the collective, that the group is used to doing, simply to avoid having a confrontation or some type of discourse. So, I just wanted to touch on a few of those things. If you guys have any funny sayings or silly sayings that you want to bring up, I can totally address those. Just feel free to leave a comment. Catch me on the next Tiger Talk. It'll be Friday, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I am going to stick to one of two of these topics. If you all want to, vote on which topic we actually get into, that's totally fine. I might just end up flipping a coin, but it is going to be either love or cloning. They're not even in the same ballpark. I know, apples and oranges, but they both grow on trees, right? But yeah, love or cloning. Don't know how it's going to go down. But feel free to hit us up. www.facebook.com/the1goodreason, 1 being the number 1. And you can catch us on YouTube. Just type in T1GR Talk, and I'm uploading all of these live talks to YouTube. All right. Thanks for giving a fuck about the show. Enjoy your weekends. Take care. Be safe. Goodbye.